Hey you guys, it's your favorite real estate professional and entrepreneur, Andrea. So I'm multitasking, so bear with me, I'm cooking. But the premise of this video was from a client of mine that is currently under contract for her home, and her appraisal came in. And her response led me to believe that she wasn't 100% clear on what the appraisal meant to her. Hello, Michael. Good evening. Thriving Thursday. So, an appraisal is a valuation of a property. So, when you apply for a home, the bank sends out an appraiser to go check the property out, any renovations that may have been made, any upgrades, the condition of the property. They check all of these things, they visit the property, and they send the bank an appraisal report, which is an analysis of what they think the property is worth, okay? So now we understand what an appraisal is. Now, what does that mean to a buyer? So I'm gonna give you an example. Say my buyer is buying a home for $300,000. That was our offer price. That was our agreed upon price, right? And me, I'm a stickler for an appraisal contingency. So an appraisal contingency means that regardless of what I offer you, we offer you whatever the appraisal says the property is worth, that's what my buyer is paying. All right, so I like to include that in my contracts. It's not always necessary, but it is important, because what happens is if there isn't an appraisal contingency, then the buyer will be responsible for paying whatever the appraisal says. All right? And so don't get scared, you guys. I'm making plantain, so the smoke is just a little smoky. I'm frying. So that's an appraisal. That's an appraisal contingency. All right? So what does an appraisal mean to a buyer? All right, so our purchase price, our offer price was $300,000. The appraisal report comes in and says that the house is actually worth $340,000, right? So that means that the appraised value exceeds our offer price. So as a buyer, what this means is that you bought a house that is worth more than what you're paying for. So you're clear. It is not a bad thing. That does not mean that you now have to increase your offer to the appraised value. It means that now you are purchasing a property with equity. So the definition of equity is the difference between what a house is, what you owe on a house, whatever the loan is on the house, the difference between what is owed on the house and what the house is worth. So if our offer price was $320 and the appraisal comes, well, no, I said $300. So if the offer price is $300 and the appraiser says the house is $340,000, how much equity do I have now? How much equity does my buyer have? So if equity is the difference between what is owed or the offer price versus what the property is valued at, how much equity do we have? So in the scenario where the offer price is $300,000 and the appraisal comes back at $340,000, that means that my buyer, once they purchase this home and it belongs to them, they now have $40,000 in equity. It's a beautiful thing. Now let me give you a different scenario. Hold on, I'm gonna let you guys see what I got going on real quick. Interrupt. So I'm making some plantain. I got some sweet potatoes cooking. I'm making some chicken. And I have some spinach that I'm gonna put in last. All right, I just had to show out real quick. I haven't cooked, so normally when my children aren't here, I don't cook. I eat like snacks and things like that. Yes, Miss Davis, you are absolutely right. So normally when my children aren't here, I don't cook. I usually eat like snacks or I go out to eat. But I needed some therapy because I absolutely love to cook. So I said that I would cook for myself just because it's a happy place for me. So anyway, now let's go in a different direction. So considering the appraisal, because I love for you to understand what this means. I love to educate and empower my buyers. So say the offer price is $300,000 and the appraiser says the house is only worth $290,000. right? So what does that mean for a buyer? If you have an appraisal contingency, if your realtor has included an appraisal contingency in your contract, that now, either way, if your realtor is doing their job, it's working for you, right? So if you have an appraisal contingency and the appraisal comes in lower than what your offer is, you now have the opportunity, your realtor will present the appraisal report to the listing agent and the sellers. We'll let them know, hey, the appraisal came back at $290. Our offer was $300. They can now either lower the price to $290 or let you out of the contract. I'll tell you, in my 15 years plus of doing real estate, I have had one seller refuse the price change, and the reason being it was a super low appraisal. It came back maybe $35,000 less than the offer price, and they were an investor, so they were willing to chance the market, leave it on the market with hopes that the market would increase and they would get what they were asking for. But in my 15 plus years, I've only had one seller that denied the appraisal, which means that they lowered the price. So either way, as a buyer, if you have an agent that is working for you and includes certain terms and conditions in your contract that protect your interests, you don't have to worry either way. So if my appraisal comes back lower than what I offer, I will now pay what the house is worth and we move on with the deal. And now instead of paying $300, I pay $390. All right. So again, I wanted to clarify this because I was corresponding with my buyer and they thought it was a bad thing. Like, oh, the appraisal came in higher. I wish it would have came closer to our offer price. And I'm like, oh, no. This is a good thing. You now have equity in your home. And that is extremely hard to find, especially in today's time. Since this whole pandemic, I have seen buyers purchase homes way above appraisal value, which means that they're paying out of pocket for a home, which means they're upside down when purchasing, okay? So let me clarify what that means. And I'm gonna use the same example. I offer $300,000. The appraiser says that the house is only worth $275,000. There are buyers, and mind you, you do whatever you want. Never something I recommend, but there are buyers who are paying $300,000 for a $275,000 home because the inventory is so low. So what does that mean to you as a buyer? That means that you now own a home. You paid more for a home than it's actually worth. Yes, this is happening in today's market. Personally, not my recommendation, but this is the type of real estate environment that we're living in. So I always want you to understand what an appraisal means to you. I also want you to understand what an appraisal contingency means to you. So if your real estate agent has not included an appraisal contingency in your contract, if your appraisal comes in lower than what you offered, you could absolutely be responsible for coming out of pocket and paying the difference at settlement. So I want you to be aware and fully educated. You know my motto, the more educated you are, the more powerful you are. So again, never want to take up too much of your time, you guys, but I also want to be sure that I'm sharing valuable information with you so you can be an educated and empowered buyer. So an appraisal, when it comes in higher than what you offer, you have what? Equity. If the appraisal comes in lower than what you offered, if you have a bomb-ass agent like me and they've included an appraisal contingency, that means that you now have the opportunity to present it to the seller and they will lower the price to what it's actually valued at, and you will not pay more than the house is worth. All right. So appraisal contingency, and equity were the key components that you were supposed to take from this. Again, really quick, just to educate and empower you. An appraisal is a valuation from the bank. They send out an appraiser to tell them how much the house is worth, because remember, the bank is only going to give you what the house is worth. So if you go under contract higher than what the appraiser says, you will be responsible for that difference. Appraisal contingency, which is something that your realtor will put into the terms and conditions of your contract, meaning my buyer will only pay as much as the appraisal says the house is valued at. So if you're a savvy buyer and you're only willing to pay what the house is valued at, make sure your realtor includes that in your contract. Equity, the difference between what the house is valued at and what you either purchase it at or own it at. Prime example again, I bought the house at $300,000. The appraisal says it's worth $340,000. You now have $40,000 in equity. To go a little deeper, you can refinance your home probably like 6 months after purchase, and you can take the equity out of your home. Right now with their super low rates, a lot of people are refinancing and liquidating their equity, meaning putting money in their pocket because they may be out of work. They may need money for other things, but equity is super important. Again, the difference between what the house is valued at and what is either owed on the property or what you purchase it for. So equity is important. If you can buy a home below market, I definitely encourage you to do that. What can you do with equity? You can refinance. You can take that money out of the home. You can pay for medical expenses. You can pay for your children's college tuition. You can put it in your pocket because right now income is so uncertain. So equity is an asset. And you know my motto, assets over liabilities always. All right, you guys. So I am going to make sure I don't burn some shit up and finish dinner. But I hope this video has brought value to your life and has helped to educate and empower you towards ownership. You know my motto, you know my mission is always to shift your mindset, help you acquire assets, and buy real estate like a boss. Have a wonderful evening, you guys. Until next time, peace.